Super Typhoon Haiyan, 2013. On November 8, 2013, the Philippines faced the fury of Haiyan, one of the most powerful tropical cyclones ever recorded. Winds of over 190 miles per hour tore through cities and villages, flattening everything in sight. Roofs ripped away, steel bent like paper, and entire neighborhoods were shredded in seconds. But it was the storm surge that delivered the killing blow. In Tacloban, walls of water surged inland, higher than the rooftops, swallowing streets in black chaos. Families were swept away, their cries lost in the roar of the sea. Survivors clung to anything that floated: trees, furniture, even the corpses of the drowned as. The water carried them into the unknown. When the storm cleared, the devastation was beyond imagination. Over 6,300 lives were lost, and millions were left homeless. The survivors described the city as if it had been bombed into dust. Haiyan was more than a storm, it was a nightmare of wind and water, a reminder that even in the modern world, nature can strike with medieval cruelty. Super Typhoon Vera, 1959. In September of 1959, Japan faced the wrath of Super Typhoon Vera, also known as the Ise Bay typhoon. The storm roared ashore with winds that ripped homes apart, but it was the flooding that sealed its horror. The storm surge poured into Ise Bay, submerging entire towns. Villages disappeared under the black water, their lights snuffed out forever. More than 5,000 people were killed, and millions were left homeless. Survivors remembered the sight of endless fields of wreckage, broken houses, drowned cattle, and the bodies of neighbors drifting in silence. Vera remains the deadliest typhoon in Japan's history, a wound carved deep into the nation's memory. The Great Storm of 1703. It began in late November, 1703, monstrous storms sweeping across England, Wales, and beyond. For nearly 2 weeks, Europe was battered by winds unlike anything seen before. In London, roofs tore free, church steeples collapsed, and the Thames overflowed its banks. In the countryside, entire forests were flattened and villages destroyed. But it was at sea where the storm became a massacre. The Royal Navy lost more than a dozen warships. Thousands of sailors were swallowed by waves as tall as houses. Survivors spoke of winds that screamed like demons, of ships splitting apart in the black water, their crews dragged into the depths. By the storm's end, over 8,000 lives had been lost. It was a disaster so profound that many believed it was divine punishment. The Great Storm of 1703 still haunts the history of Britain, a reminder that no empire, no matter how mighty, can stand against the fury of the skies. Cyclone Lothar, 1999. Christmas of 1999 should have been a time of peace across Europe. Families gathered in warm homes, lights glowed in the windows, and the continent settled into winter. But on December 25th, the atmosphere above shifted violently. Out of the Atlantic, a monster was born, Cyclone Lothar. It struck France first. Winds screamed through the countryside at nearly 150 miles per hour. Roofs tore from homes, church spires snapped in half, and centuries-old trees were ripped from the earth like weeds. Power lines collapsed, plunging millions into darkness on what should have been a night of light. The storm did not stop. It swept into Belgium, Luxembourg, Germany, leaving a trail of ruin. Entire forests were flattened in hours. Cars were hurled from roads, glass shattered across city squares, turning the wind itself into a storm of blades. By the time Lothar passed, over 110 people were dead, and damages exceeded 15 billion euros, making it one of the costliest windstorms in European history. Survivors still remember the sound, a howl that never ended, a wind that seemed alive, tearing the world apart. Lothar was a reminder that even in modern Europe, with all its strength and technology, a storm can still arrive without mercy and leave behind nothing but silence. The Great Lakes Storm of 1913, in November of 1913. The Great Lakes prepared for another winter. Sailors knew the waters could be treacherous, but nothing could have prepared them for the storm that would become known as the Big Blow. On November 7th, the winds rose. For 4 days, the storm raged across the lakes with the fury of a hurricane. Snow and sleet blinded crews, waves as high as 35 feet crashed across the decks of ships, and winds tore sails and masts to pieces. One by one, ships vanished. Some sank so quickly The crews never had time to send a distress call. Others were hurled onto the rocks, their hulls splintered like kindling. Entire fleets were lost. More than 250 sailors perished, their bodies washing ashore for weeks afterward. The lakes were littered with wreckage, steel freighters snapped in half, wooden schooners crushed beneath waves. Survivors described the storm as if the lakes themselves had risen in rage, determined to claim every ship in sight. On land, blizzards buried towns, isolating families in darkness and cold. Supplies ran short. Roads vanished beneath snowdrifts taller than men. It was not just a storm, it was a siege by nature itself. When the skies finally cleared, the Great Lakes region was in mourning. 19 ships lay destroyed, dozens more crippled, and an entire generation of sailors lost beneath the waves. The Great Lakes storm of 1913 remains one of the most terrifying maritime disasters in North American history, a reminder that even inland seas can carry the fury of the ocean.